I grew up in Pennsylvania. I'm a small town kind of in the middle of nowhere. I went to high school and I was really interested in art and I took all the art classes and I knew I was going to go to art school and I didn't know what I wanted to study at art school, which was fine because the first year, had the foundation year where you kind of like take a little bit of everything, sculpture, drawing, computer stuff. And I can remember I started out doing graphic design and I liked it. I loved like typography, but the minute I had to like print something out and cut it with like a ruler and everything was like very like precise and perfect, it's like, oh, this isn't the right thing. So changed my major to general fine arts, which just kind of let me take classes in anything that I wanted. And I still wanted to do stuff with typography and graphic design, and there was a few After Effects classes that I took, and that was kind of like my first foray into motion design and stuff. And I did that. And sort of minored in video. So, because my mom was like, "That's great that you're doing like a general fine arts major, but I want to it'd be nice if you could like get a job." It's like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. Like graduation's kind of coming up. So, yeah, decided to minor in video, and took all the video classes and animation stuff. And then after school, I was shooting wedding videos for a while. And I was like, I should get an internship to kind of like get a foot in the door somewhere. And I had family. My aunt works in advertising, so I like emailed her and said, "Hey, do you know anybody there that does anything with animation?" She said, "Well, they're kind of starting like a new little department within the agency that does I think what that is." Like she didn't really know what animation was, but it's like I think that's what they do. She's like, "Well, I'll give you the guy's email, and you can email him and like talk on the phone and see if see if anything fits." And so we talked on the phone, and it was really awkward. And like I was like, I think I just kind of sold myself on the phone. Like, yeah, I know animation, I know masks and keyframes, and like just kind of like spit out everything I knew about After Effects. And he's like, I think I convinced him because he's like, well, okay, like come out to San Francisco, and we'll see how it goes. And so that's where I got an internship at Goodby, where I like eventually met Colin, and he started like a year later. Yeah, so I worked at an agency, and then the creative director there left to start Autofuss, and worked there for like 3 years. And that was like a half design and animation, half robotics company that had a sister company called Bot and Dolly, that was doing a lot of like motion control work. And so I worked there for a number of years, and then just kind of like the focus of that company shifted like almost completely to the robotics and live action, and I knew I wanted to do like design and animation. So that's when I left and kind of like freelanced around for a little bit. I worked back at Goodby for a year and kind of would take on small projects here and there. And at the same time, kind of like that's when me and Colin were starting to get together on stuff because he had gone freelance and I had gone freelance, and we'd get emails and people would say like, "Oh, we love your work, would you do something for us?" And then be like, well, I'd be like, "Hey, Colin, I just got this email. These guys are kind of like reaching out for a project. Maybe we should team up on it." Because it's more than just one person can do. So yeah, we start to team up and take on more and more projects, and that's kind of like what eventually led to the idea of like, well, this is really, it's nice to collaborate, so if we could do this all the time, that'd be fun. Portland was kind of like, it was random. We were having trouble bringing a lot of people to San Francisco because it's so expensive, like the cost of living there is really expensive. And we were trying to hire talent, to come work with us because we were small and we needed to grow. We felt like, okay, we've got enough work now that we can bring some people out. And we were reaching out to some of the people we collaborated with all the time, and a lot of those guys were in New York. And we're like, well, hey, what do you think about coming to San Francisco and working with us? And they're like, I don't know, like New York's expensive. If I want to go to another city, I don't know if I want to go to another expensive city like San Francisco. And at that time, my wife and I and TJ, who's our executive producer, was thinking about like something else, something where it's like better for families, cost of living's a little bit cheaper. And so we started to throw around other cities, like maybe we could open up a studio in Nashville, Tennessee, maybe we could open up a studio in Seattle, and then Portland. And when we said Portland to a lot of the people that we were talking to in New York, they're like, oh yeah, Portland, like if you move to Portland and open a studio there, we'll come, So like, okay, maybe there's something to that. So we just kind of like went for it, and it's like, okay, we'll open a studio in Portland. We made sure that we get like those guys were kind of on board, so we didn't move to Portland for no reason. And then we kind of, I don't know, we kind of all gathered there at the same time. We have like 13 people total, and San Francisco has four, and then Portland has everybody else. And we didn't want it to feel like two different studios. It was really important to us that like it wasn't like a Portland team and a San Francisco team. That like, we were cross-pollinating on all the projects and flying people up and flying people down to make it feel like collaborative and like one team. Yeah, that's really important to us. Technically, we do a lot of like Google Hangouts. A lot of we use Slack as kind of like our project management, team management software. So we're like kind of always chatting with each other. Um, I mean, that's kind of really it. I mean, and it's just like a lot of communication, making sure like checking in a lot, making sure everybody's on the same page. Um, and then sometimes like if we're kicking off a big project, like call him to come up to Portland. If like most of the people he's working with are in Portland, he'll come up, kick off the project, and then pop in and out throughout or something like that. Yeah, I mean that was one of the other reasons we moved to Portland is because we felt like we had a foot in the door pretty good in San Francisco with all the technology companies, right? We would do a lot of work for Twitter and Facebook, and Google, and that work's super fun. But we wanted to diversify a little bit, and we thought, well, another good reason to open up a studio in Portland is that we can get in, maybe we can do some work for Nike and some of the like the outdoor companies and stuff, and just I don't know, a lot of the guys like really like the great outdoors and kind of being outside and stuff, and so just to diversify our portfolio. That was also like one of the reasons why Portland was kind of a good idea. So day to day, I go in. We usually kick off all the teams, like kind of check in with everybody, see how everybody's doing, and then spend the morning doing a lot of emails, making checking with clients. If we have like remote people, like freelancers in New York or Tokyo, a lot of guys are there, so we'll check in with those people, send emails and give feedback. But yeah, like it's been tricky, kind of like stepping away and doing less creative stuff because it was nice to kind of always just be able to put your headphones on and put some music on, just like animate all day long and set keyframes. So yeah, it's been hard to kind of like let go of that. But I think that's why like we still try to do a lot of personal projects because that lets us kind of like after hours or on the weekends or on slower days kind of get back in there and do what we like, do what we love doing. I used to be on Vimeo all the time, like a lot, and then Pinterest was huge to like just collect and collect and collect like everything that like could inspire you. And then I got worried that like if I'm just like always seeing these things and like are the ideas that I'm coming up with as original as they could be. And I don't know that anything's original. Like we remix stuff from everywhere. Everything we see kind of like finds its way into some of the work that we do. But to try to like limit that, so lately that's what I've been trying to do is and not spend as much time which is hard because everybody at work is like, "Oh, did you see this thing on Vimeo?" Just like, and you want to look but yeah, try to limit that a little bit just so that I'm not just copying or subconsciously bringing all that stuff in. So for me, like as I think I have like an animator's background, and so one of the things that's always really inspired me is music and just listening to music and like the way you hear the beats and the rhythms and things and the on beat and off beat and just kind of like that helps me think about. I don't want to hear music. You can start to visualize things, and then you feel kind of like the tempo and the pace of something, and then I start to think about you kind of put visuals to that, and I don't know, the way something feels kind of helps you, or the way something sounds like turns into a feeling, and then that turns into like a physical thing that like kind of comes out in design. Yeah, I mean, I think I had mentors, obviously, kind of like in the earlier parts of my career. When I was at Goodby Silverstein and Partners, there was a guy named Randy Stowell who was our creative director there, and he was like the first person that I think, like in art school, we weren't necessarily taught how to use the programs. We were taught like more conceptually, like just like how to think, which is great. And so I never had anybody that like kind of really nerd out with and talk about like keyframes and like I don't know and editing on the beats and all that stuff like so Randy, I think he was one of the first people that said like, okay, just because it's animation, there's like lots of frames doesn't mean that every frame shouldn't be beautiful. And I remember working with him, we would just like step through like every frame of the animation, even though it's like we were doing a lot, back then it was 30 frames per second was like the thing all the time, but yeah, stepping through and making sure that every frame was beautiful, and that was I think like that was one of the most inspiring things, like at that time earlier, in my career, that it's like, yeah, that's right. It just doesn't. It's not just because it's not a still, like every frame can still be beautiful. So yeah, I'm one of the moderators on Wine After Coffee. Where did we meet? I think it was we met on the internet. It was Vimeo, and I remember putting out. It was the one of the Film Fest title sequences from Goodby Silverstein and Partners, and I put it out on Vimeo. And it was one of the first things like we put out on Vimeo, and he commented on it. He's like, "Oh, cool! Hey, I'm working on a project that's just like this." At the time, I didn't know like who he was. And then through like releasing other projects and me seeing his stuff, like we'd comment back and forth on each other's things and just kind of build a friendship that way. And then yeah, we just chat back and forth online. And then he asked Colin and I to be moderators. And I don't know, the internet, we just kind of like kept in touch. And we're big fans of each other's work. And yeah, it kind of turned into a good friendship. He was just working. He came to Oddfellows and worked on a project with us not too long ago for Twitter. So it was exciting to like finally get to work together after just being like kind of internet buddies for so long. Design is so important to be varied. Like if we have a few principal designers that do a lot of our work, but if they were the only designers that were working with us, I think our what we'd output would look with like one voice. We like to have a lot of voices, and so I think that's why we are always looking for freelancers and like fresh people to work with, because we don't want it to become like too singular in what we're kind of like putting out into the world. No, we never shot. We'd always work with production companies and kind of partner with them to do the live action stuff, and then we would do graphics on top. And we still collaborate with people like that. I think that's something we're thinking about doing a little bit more of. But animation, I think, will always be, as long as animation is the main focus of it. I think like doing some of that with live action is interesting. But yeah, we didn't do very much like hands-on shooting ourselves. I mean, I think in the simplest definition can think of is that motion design is, it sounds cheesy, design in motion, right? Just graphic design brought to life, with motion graphics, animation. And I think there's like some people are always trying to separate like what is motion graphics and what is, is like the minute you have characters in it, is it motion graphics anymore, right? And there's some gray area there, like, well, when does it become about a character and it becomes like a film, and when is it motion design and it's graphic and more abstract or conceptual? Trends are interesting because you at the beginning of the trend you see like, oh, that's really cool, like I want to try that thing. And then it sort of like plateaus out where like everybody's doing that thing now. And then towards the end of the trend is I feel like when the clients pick up on it, and then the clients are kind of seeing the trends as just they're starting to go down, but they really like them now, and so it kind of brings this like wave of that trend coming back again. So I think we don't like to be trendy, but I like to be aware of the trends, because I know a year into them, a client is going to come out, reach out to us and say like, hey, we really like this thing that everybody's doing. We want you to do that for our brand. And I like to be able to like see that trend and think about like, how can we do that just a little bit differently so that we're giving the client what they want, but not just doing what everybody else is doing. We just grew a bunch. We went from 4 people to 13 people in the past year. So I think just kind of pause for a moment and see how everybody starts working together and how that team feels before we grow anymore. Future, I don't know. I think we've been doing a lot of just kind of like linear storytelling, animation, and I think we'd like to experiment a little bit with some things like 360 video and see what that's like, an animated 360 video. I don't know if we'll dive fully into VR. We've done a little bit of that, like some titles for Google Cardboard that was VR, but start to see what other avenues there are for animation besides just kind of like linear storytelling, making short films and commercials and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with VR, because I think a lot of designers and studio owners are worried about like, well, as people are watching less and less TV the way we traditionally do with commercials and stuff like that, where what are all the avenues for motion design? Like, where can it go? And so I think when UI became such a prevalent thing that not only were people just kind of like clicking through stuff, but using animation to kind of like help you get there and to really like make the experience richer. I think there are things like that in VR and holograms and augmented reality and all that stuff that'll be really interesting to see, like where motion design kind of like finds its place in those sort of mediums. Yeah, I think we'd like to do a lot of different things. I mean, title sequence is something we've always talked about doing. That would be interesting. We haven't done like that many. It's funny because Colin and I kind of come from our background is sort of like autofuss and like the visual effects and not necessarily title sequences, but typography over live action picture. Um, and so I think now that we've done so much 2D work, we're kind of like, oh, we kind of miss like some of that stuff that we grew up on, the stuff that we kind of like learned motion graphics through, more graphic designy, more formal looking stuff. Um, so I think we'd like to get back into a little bit of that and maybe do some film titles. Um, I think we want to do some more short films, like the 360 videos, something that we definitely want to explore. I think that was one of our next projects was going to be that, and then we started thinking like, well, games is kind of fun. Like we all like to play games, so and that's just something like something interesting about making keyframes kind of tangible, right? Like playing with, getting to play with your keyframes. We're working on something, a pinball game right now for one of the technology companies, and it's just interesting to kind of like think less linear about the story that we have to tell. Like, since there will be like a user playing with this thing, like you have to think of all kinds of like possibilities and stories and ways this thing could go. So it's interesting to work on projects I think that are like that, just like a little bit different.